few vocabulary things basically we have to make sure you know before you can move on to your Act 2 activity for Unit 8. Um, for these notes at the very top, can you write correlation? And we're going to talk about what a positive correlation means, a negative correlation, and maybe if there's no correlation at all when we talk about some of these relationships that you're going to see in just a few minutes. Okay, so two values can have a positive correlation. And what a positive correlation means is that as one value goes up, the other goes up also. So when we're talking about two different values, as one value goes up, or increases, the other value does the same thing. The other value also goes up. Okay? So that would be called a positive correlation. An example of that would be the more time you spend studying, the higher your grade in class will go. So as the time increases, as time goes up, then your grade would also go up. That would be an example of a positive correlation. Okay, we also have a negative correlation. And a negative correlation would be as one value goes up, the other value goes down. So as one value increases or goes up, the other value, the other goes down. Okay, and an example of that would be something like the more, as you increase the amount of money that you spend, the amount that you have saved would decrease. So the amount of money, as the amount of money you spend goes up, the amount of money that you have saved would decrease. So they would do the opposite things. That would be an example of a negative correlation. Okay, so that's what it looks like in Word, the two. Can you draw a line underneath what we just did here? And let's look at what it looks like when we graph those things. So let's look at a positive correlation first. For a positive correlation graph would look like this. I'm going to go ahead and draw a first quadrant coordinate plane here. And I'm going to go back to the example that we used here with time and grade. I'll put time down here and your grade in class right here. And so as time goes this way, your grade would go up. So positive correlation, the dots would basically be going uphill. Okay, so they would look like they're going uphill. Now there may be a few here or here that don't exactly fit the pattern. These are what we would call outliers. They're kind of exceptions to every rule. So, but in general, you would say that this trend is going uphill, uphill. So that would be a positive correlation. Now when we look at correlations, we can talk about whether they are perfect, strong, weak, and that's how closely these kind of are together. I'll show you an example, and you can see one that's stronger than that. So if you draw another graph here to the right of this, and let's say we'd have another correlation, and this time it would look more like this, where the dots are a little bit stronger going uphill. So these would both be positive correlations because they're both going uphill, but this one would be strong, and this one would be a little bit weaker than the other when we compare it to the other. If it's a perfect positive correlation, then the dots would be in a perfect straight line. Okay, so we also have negative correlations. And let's look at what that looks like on a graph here. So I'm going to draw a first quadrant coordinate plane here like this. And I'm going to go back to my example that I used at the very beginning with money spent and money saved. Okay, so here I'll say this is money spent, and this one will be money saved. And as the amount of money spent goes up, the amount of money saved would go down, so the graph would look something like this. It would look like it's going downhill. Okay? So that would be a negative correlation. And again, if the dots look a little tighter than that, it would be a little bit stronger then. In fact, if the dots are in a perfect straight line, it would be a perfect negative correlation. Now these aren't in a perfect straight line, but you can see that these are a little bit a tighter configuration. So this would be a strong, and this would be a weak negative correlation. Again, you may have some dots that don't fit the pattern perfectly, and we said before that those are called outliers. Okay? All right, well, there's a way on your calculator that you can actually check if a correlation is strong, weak, negative, perfect. I'll show you exactly how we do that. Can you draw a line underneath what we just did here? And let's move to our calculator stuff. Okay, so on your TI-84, we can do something called a correlation coefficient. And a correlation coefficient will be a number that you'll get. It'll be between -1, it's denoted by an R, and a 1. If the correlation coefficient is -1, that is a perfect negative correlation. If it's +1, that is a perfect positive correlation. If it's a 0 right in the middle, or even as it gets close to 0, 0 means that there's no correlation at all. Okay, so let's see how this works on our calculator. The first thing you've got to make sure you do is you have to make sure diagnostics is turned on. So the way that you do that is you are going to hit the second button, and then you're going to hit the 0. Then you need to arrow down until it says diagnostics on, until you see the word diagnostics on. When you have that highlighted, you'll hit enter, and then you'll hit enter again. Before you go to the next page here on a calculator, do that right now. Put this in and make sure diagnostics is turned on, because for the very last thing we're going to do, we're going to put in a table, and we're going to check what type of correlation the table gives us. Okay, so type that in right now, make sure diagnostics is turned on, and as soon as it is, then restart this, pause it for right now, and then move to our last example. Okay, so right now you should have a calculator and you should have turned diagnostics on. Okay, then what I want you to do is I want you to put this table into the stat. So you should know how to do that. Enter this table in 5, 12, 6, 15, 2, and 8. And to the right we'll put 8 and 15 and 8 again and 23 and 2 and 13. Okay, so go ahead and enter that table into your stat there. As soon as it's in there, then we should be able to do regression, and you should know how to do that. We're going to do linear regression. In fact, on all of these, we'll always do, for right now, linear regression. The coefficient, the correlation coefficient that we're looking at is the one to see if it's linear or not. So we will do stat. We will hit the right arrow button. We will pick number 4. And then we'll hit enter. And now you should see a bunch of stuff there, the function and all that. It'd actually be the line of best fit. We're going to talk about that in the next one. But what I want you to look at is the R. The R value is the correlation coefficient. And the R you should have gotten is 0.9788, and then it keeps going. Since that is close to 1, that is a strong, positive correlation. Remember, it exists on it goes from -1 to +1. And since this number right here is really close to 1, it's not a perfect positive correlation, but it is pretty strong. It's very, very close to it. Okay, on your next activity then, you're going to do some stuff with correlation. Make sure you have your notes out as you're doing the Act 2 activity for 8.1.